Hi everyone, I'm Eric Eaton and welcome to my second annual NCAA Men's Basketball Tournament preview show. Over the course of this program, I will predict the tournament starting with the round of 16 all the way to the national title game in New Orleans. But before I do that, I want to give you some of my general thoughts on this tournament. The number one seeds, of course, we've got Kentucky in the South, Michigan State in the West, Syracuse in the East, and North Carolina in the Midwest. As far as the toughest region goes, in my opinion, I think it's the East region, which, of course, Syracuse is the number one seed. You've got a number 3 seed there in Florida State, which beat Duke and North Carolina in back-to-back days to win the ACC tournament. And you've got a number 5 seed in Vanderbilt, which had an impressive win over Kentucky in the SEC tournament final there in New Orleans. And then you've got a Syracuse team which looked disinterested, I thought, in the Big East tournament where they fell to Cincinnati. We'll see if they can reclaim some of their luster they had in the middle part of the season before that conference tournament in this region. The toughest region, that is the East, which I just told you about. The weakest, I think it's the South. The South region is where Kentucky is the number 1 seed and Duke is the number 2 seed. Both of those teams excellent pedigrees, but Duke very average at times this year. In fact, lost 3 home games in front of the Cameron Crazies. You've got a number 3 seed there, Baylor, out of the Big 12, which I thought underachieved in the conference. They did reach the conference tournament final game before falling to Missouri there, but they were just 1-5 against both Missouri and Kansas in the Big 12 this year. You've got a number 4 seed there in Indiana. A nice story for Tom Crean this year, getting them back to the tournament, but they really struggle away from home in Bloomington. In fact, just one win against a tournament team on the road this year, and that was at Purdue. So that's what I think is the weakest region there, that being the South region. Let's take a look at some first-round upsets now to help you fill out your brackets. These are a few upsets that I've highlighted that I will think happen. I guess you'll either think I'm a fool or maybe I'm a genius after the games play out. Let's take a look at what I think of some of the first-round upsets will be here. First of all, in the South, I've got Colorado beating UNLV. Tad Boyle has done a great job, particularly on defense with this Colorado team, as he got the Buffaloes to win the Pac-12 tournament title to get the Colorado Buffaloes into the tournament. UNLV struggles on the road, and had 5 conference road losses this year, and they had 3 wins in the conference road games in overtime. And those teams that they beat in overtime, I believe, were Air Force, TCU, and Boise State. So not really the top of the middle teams that they actually did win on the road in overtime. So I've got Colorado beating the UNLV Rebels in that upset in the South region. Moving out west, I've got Long Beach State over New Mexico in a West region game. 49ers coach Dan Munson, he's no stranger to taking mid-majors deep into the NCAA tournament. He did it with Gonzaga, got him all the way to the Elite 8 before losing to UConn. He's got a terrific player in Casper Ware, who had 33 points in the Big West final there to get the 49ers into this tournament. And so I think they played a tough schedule as well. The Long Beach State has. They played North Carolina, Pitt, and Xavier in the non-conference. So they're well tested, and I think they will beat New Mexico in this game. Only quality wins for the Lobos this year: San Diego State and UNLV. A couple other upsets to keep your eye on out in the Midwest region. I like the Ohio University Bobcats over the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan didn't finish the season strong. They lost 2 of their final 5 games, and they barely beat undermanned Penn State and Minnesota at the end of the season. So they weren't playing very good ball. Ohio, a very good defensive team, and particularly good at limiting 3-point shots, and that's a strength of Michigan. So I think a strength of Ohio will actually maybe win out over the strength of Michigan in this game, as Michigan will go down to the Ohio Bobcats in the first-round game. 2 other first-round upsets that I've keyed in on here. And before I get to my predictions, starting with the round of 16, I've got North Carolina State, a 6 seed, defeating San Diego State in the Midwest bracket. And I've also got Purdue, a 10 seed, taking down St. Mary's, a 7 seed there in that Midwest bracket as well. So those are some few first-round upsets to keep your eyes on. Perhaps take a shot on them, take a flyer on them, put them down as upsets in your bracket. Hey, I'll take the blame if they don't pan out. Let's move on to my predictions now, starting with the round of 16, and we'll go all the way to the national title game in New Orleans. Let's start in the South region. These games will be played in Atlanta, Georgia. In one Sweet 16 matchup, I've got Kentucky taking on Wichita State, with the Kentucky Wildcats moving on to the Elite Eight. In the second regional game in Atlanta, I've got Colorado to take on the Duke Blue Devils, with number 2 seed Duke moving on, setting up a number 1 versus number 2 showdown between Kentucky and Duke in the South region. Of course, everyone knows about the terrific game these two played 20 years ago in 1992, perhaps the greatest game ever played in college basketball, with Duke prevailing in an East Regional final on a last-second shot by Christian Laettner. I don't think we'll see the same type of game this time, certainly not the heroics at the end of the game. I think UK will beat Duke in this regional final. You know, Coach Cal, I think, will get his team re-energized after that loss to Vanderbilt. They're going to be ready in this game. You know, Anthony Davis is a shot-blocking machine. Duke struggles against tough defensive teams, which Kentucky is, having lost a couple games to Florida State in Temple. So I like Kentucky to move on to the Final Four in New Orleans. Let's move now to the West Regional. These games to be played in Phoenix. I've got Michigan State taking down Long Beach State in one regional semifinal in Phoenix. And then in the other one, I've got Missouri to take out Murray State in the second regional final in Phoenix. That sets up a regional final between number 1 seed Michigan State and number 2 seed Missouri. This should be a great game, but I'm going to give the edge to Missouri in this game. You know, the Tigers, I think, will have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder in this game. I think inside themselves they feel like perhaps they should be the number 1 seed in this region, not Michigan State. Committee did not see it that way, though, and I think the Tigers will play with a bit of chip on their shoulder in this game. Frank Haith has 4 seniors with experience. They're a high-scoring team, the highest-scoring team in the Big 12. They've got excellent guard play in the backcourt. You know, Marcus Denmon's a great guard for Missouri. Really, one thing Michigan State doesn't have, and I think that's going to be the difference. Michigan State does not have the playmaker in the backcourt that sometimes we've seen some of Tom Izzo's great teams have. You know, Draymond Green will be a tough matchup for Missouri, but I think the Tigers move on to the Final Four in New Orleans, beating Michigan State. Let's move out to the East region in Boston. In one semifinal, I've got Syracuse matching up with Vanderbilt. I've got Syracuse moving on in that game. This should be a great game, but I think the Orange will move on to the East regional final. In the second regional semifinal, I've got Florida State doing battle with Ohio State, with Florida State's defense just being too much for Ohio State. Florida State marches on to play Syracuse. And in the East regional final, I've got Florida State taking out Syracuse. You know, any team that can beat Duke and North Carolina 4 times in a season, they're a good team in my book. So I think they'll take out Syracuse in this one. They also limit opponents to 37% field goal shooting per game. That's outstanding defense. You know, Syracuse has struggled at times to rebound the ball this year, and Florida State's going to be very tough and physical with them. So I look for Florida State to move on to New Orleans in the Final Four. The final piece of the puzzle to go to New Orleans, the Midwest Regional Final to take place in St. Louis. I've got North Carolina to do battle with Georgetown in this regional final, and I think this game's going to be all North Carolina over Georgetown. You know, North Carolina came alive down the stretch, winning 9 in a row before losing to Florida State in the ACC final, including an 88-70 thrashing of Duke in Durham. You know, they've got an excellent front court, the Heels do. With likes of Harrison Barnes, Tyler Zeller, and John Henson. They're going to move on to New Orleans in the Final Four. So that takes us to New Orleans for the Final Four. In one semifinal, I've got North Carolina to take on Florida State. Florida State has beaten the Heels twice this year. Can they do it a third time? No. Roy Williams will not let that happen, and North Carolina will move on to the national title. Their opponent will be the Missouri Tigers. I think Missouri's experience, I talked about 4 senior starters, is going to be the difference over a young but very talented Kentucky game in the other national semifinal. That sets up a national title game of Missouri against North Carolina. What a game it should be. You've got the backcourt of Missouri versus the front court of North Carolina. Everybody says it's Missouri's weakness. They can't do battle against a great front court. Well, we're going to find out in the national title game, and I think they're going to pass the test. You know, they battled some good front courts in the Big 12 with Kansas, particularly Baylor. Baylor, a good strong front court, and they beat Baylor 3 times. So I don't think they're going to be intimidated by this North Carolina front court at all. We've seen in the past at Kansas, Roy Williams' Kansas team struggled in some big games. They haven't, not so at North Carolina. He's won both national title games he's been in. He's going to lose this one, though, to Missouri. I've got Missouri winning the national championship game in New Orleans, 77-74. That's going to wrap up my tournament preview show. Enjoy the tournament, everyone.